Released by Capcom in 1990 to the NES and Famicom, it's Street Fighter 2010. The good. The goal in each level of Street Fighter 2010 is to collect enough energy to create a portal and advance to the next level. The way to collect energy changes from each level. The game does a very spectacular job of keeping you on your toes by changing the objective and style of each level. The first level is a small area where you take out grunts until a boss arrives. After defeating him, you are transported to level 2, which is simply a small arena where you fight a boss. Level 3 is a side-scrolling platformer level that ends in a boss fight. Within the first 3 levels, you can see great change in how the level is played and what is required of you to complete the level. On top of the differences in level designs, the way you collect energy in each level is different. Some levels just have you simply beat a boss, while other levels have you defeat X amount of enemies. These two factors together lead to each level being a really nice change of pace from the last, and every level has a little bit of a surprise factor that keeps things refreshing. 2010 is also surprisingly deep in its controls. Ken can perform various combos and special moves depending on your input. You can collect power-ups and obtain more moves as the game progresses. Ken's range of movement is also surprisingly vast. Ken can do a backflip while firing blasts. He can even scale walls and hang from ledges. Because of the multitude of abilities and only having 2 buttons on the NES controller, the controls can be kind of difficult to master. With each playthrough, I improved noticeably and became more and more proficient with my arsenal of moves. In these regards, 2010 reminded me of a traditional Street Fighter game. You really have to learn the inputs and timings to master your character. To add to that, the game is incredibly difficult, which can be a hindrance at times. When you do complete a level, the feeling of triumph is superbly rewarding. As with any game, Street Fighter 2010 is not perfect, so I suppose it's time to look at the bad. As previously stated, Street Fighter 2010 is difficult, and I mean really, really difficult. Sometimes unfairly difficult. Take for instance, the fact that the game has bosses that become standard enemies later on. I love when games do this, especially RPGs. This wouldn't be a problem if this game was an RPG. But when you collect power-ups, they reset every time you die, and the game also bombards the screen with other enemies. So very often you find yourself dying, losing your power-ups, and these bosses are, well, bosses still. They're not standard enemies. Some of these levels are just plain ridiculous. The controls for some of the more advanced moves are also shaky. You can curve certain shots, but getting them to curve in the direction you want them to curve is almost impossible. The lack of saving or a password system, or hell, any kind of level selection, is pretty upsetting. Like I said, the game is difficult, so getting to your favorite level can be a huge hassle. My frustration with the difficulty certainly wasn't pretty, so it's time to talk about the ugly, where I discuss the game's graphics, presentation, and more technical aspects. Overall, I like the game's aesthetics. Enemies and backgrounds both look quite interesting. As far as performance goes, it's standard NES fare. Everything runs well until 3 or more sprites appear on screen, at which point the game suffers from a ton of flicker and huge slowdowns. Street Fighter 2010 is not a Street Fighter game. However, it is an extremely fun game, with surprising depth, although it can be very difficult at times. Street Fighter 2010, The Final Fight, gets a Street Fighter 4 on Android out of 10.